Yeah, so the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, as a business advisor, I want to say I handle probably 450 clients, and we're maybe 10 to 12 individuals here, or business advisors here in Las Vegas. Good morning. And yeah, so we all handle quite a few new business startups, and what we're seeing is there's just tremendous growth here in Las Vegas, whether it's our own organic growth because everybody's getting into the entrepreneurial spirit, or they're coming from someplace else, right? I actually work with a lot of clients, international clients even, that are like, what do we need to do business in Nevada? What does the market look like? What's growing? Where are the biggest needs? Healthcare is one of them, technology, construction. Those are the big popular ones. Creative, we know entertainment is coming here. And so even just being able to support our own network with that is really important. So with the SBDC as business advisors, we are primarily funded by the SBA. So there's a lot in flux right now, but I think the programs are still continuing. That includes SBA funding and loan options. For those who aren't familiar with SBA loans, it's along the lines of like FHA for mortgage. So we don't do the loans directly, right? It's the federal government through the SBA guarantee the loans, the bank loans, okay? So there's a process to it. A lot of times people will connect with me and say, okay, I need to apply for a loan. It's like, okay, we're here to help you get ready to apply for a loan so that you can get approved, right? And there's a challenge right now, to be honest, with the lending landscape. A lot of the traditional lenders, our banks and credit unions, really aren't open to lending specifically for startups, right? That's the biggest challenge of all. Now, if you have a business history in that specific field, if you're expanding, that's a whole other thing. So my goal is when you come to me and you're like, okay, Rachel, I need to start from the beginning. Let's create a framework for my business so I know what direction I'm going in, including having some of these lending partners. Then it's basically, okay, let's start with the business plan and let's create your story. Right, makes it much easier to present to a potential lender. I have a lot in the tech community and also in the film community that come and say, I need a pitch deck because I want to be able to pitch to investors. And that's a little bit different marketing strategy, but it always still starts with a business plan, right? You still have to have your framework. So there's a lot that we do. A lot of companies are, some companies are already in the midst of growth and trying to be competitive in their specific market. And so we help them with different marketing strategies so that they can communicate their unique value proposition to the industry or to their customers. And then a big one nowadays is actually HR compliance, the DEI stuff, new federal and state laws. So we've been having a lot of meetings regarding that. A lot of the startup community really isn't quite in the position yet to hire, right? But we do have businesses, restaurants, some that are more established, mid-sized businesses that are like, hey, we know that once you hit the 50 employee threshold mark, that there are new laws that we have to be compliant with. But even in the early startup phases, right, when we put together that business plan and the framework, it's a matter of what are your goals and your plans for growing, right? We can only wear so many hats as business owners and entrepreneurs. So first it's like, what is your strength? What do you want to be doing? What do you want to offload to somebody? We have a lot in the creative space that are like, hey, I just want to do my passion job, my project work, and I don't want to do anything with bookkeeping. So in that creative chamber, the ACE chamber that we formed, part of our goal there is also to provide professional development workshops for our creative community. So we hold business financial literacy workshops specifically for creatives. So really what we are here to do, regardless of the specific segments, is to support small business, the entrepreneurial journey, and that sort of thing. So I didn't bring any slides, but I do have business cards. I'd be happy to pass them out later. If you are interested in registering as a client with the SBDC, again, it's through UNLV's Office of Economic Development, so we have access to a lot of their resources. We have access to their internship programs, and I can go into detail with that later, but we also have, and somebody asked about our makerspace. So the makerspace at UNLV is student student, I think he's a student, led. And we do 3D printing, prototyping, graphic design, large format printing. We have that available. I work out of the Blackfire Research and Tech Park office off of the 215 and Sunset. And so we have our Office of Economic Development there, and then we have Makerspace office. So as clients, you get heavily discounted, but you get access to a lot of those things that would be really difficult and really expensive to find otherwise. So, so that's a big part of our goal in servicing or serving our small business community. And so we are kind of switching it up, and I'm going to be starting a guest speaker series. And I have the wonderful opportunity of working with a lot of small clients that come in and say, hey, I have an idea. Right? What do I need to do? Or these are my thoughts. Can you help me get some clarity? Or can you be my accountability partner, right? Give me some homework, let me do it, and let me grow into the next phase so I can continue to grow my business. I can't do this by myself. And so I love to hear those sort of stories. And so today we're going to hear from Leona Spencer, and she is one of our SBDC clients. And she is, she's been working in the renewable energy space for quite a while, and she was recently awarded one of the federal grants, and she has a lot of experience in that space. And yeah, so she wanted to be able to share that story with you. Before we bring you up really quickly, Daniel, he introduced himself at the beginning up front. Hi, UNLV. Can I have him speak really fast so we can cover UNLV? So he wanted to talk about the what was the name of it again? The club?
UNLV ACM, Association of Computing Machinery. We're at the Las Vegas chapter. It's an international organization. We're kind of right now working on planning an event in the spring to have an opportunity to connect employers and people that are working in the startup industry with students at UNLV that are eager to get the opportunity to get some experience and work in some cool projects. If you'd like to connect, I'd love to have people come and speak at the club and connect with our students, as well as potentially we're working on an event next spring that's a little bit more official through UNLV and with the computer science department to host and connect people in a more official manner.
So let's stay connected with that, because through the SBDC, we have SBDC interns, which are UNLV students. We have an internship program called Step Up Startup through UNLV, have access to computer science, the engineering department, medical, all of these other wonderful departments, and that's a reimbursable type of an internship program. And then this would be wonderful, so let's connect and let's see if we can filter through, have a single point of contact, and I can help bring the students in to work on specific projects. I think that's great. Wonderful.
Question.
Yes.
Is the SBIR new engineering development program in the state of Nevada still in effect, or did that get canceled for budgeting reasons?
Well, that's one of the things that Leona is going to be able to cover, is her personal experience with SBIR. What I've been hearing from a couple of the other grantees, or awardees, I guess, is they were awarding it, but how the funds were getting dispersed has been sort of paused, and they're trying to figure out a process for that. I haven't heard much more since then, but it's been a month or so since I've heard. But I can certainly find out. Maybe Leona has some information too. But yeah, thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. We'd love to bring in UNLV's resources. So, okay, Leona.
So as Rachel said, my name is Leona Spencer, and I have a startup here in Las Vegas called netmetergo.com. My company is Renewable Energizing Products Incorporated, and I've been working with Rachel, actually more than a year, a couple of years. And I'm not sure if I told you, but I just got my woman-owned small business from a small business, so I'm excited about that. But I wanted to talk to you today about non-diluted funding, or a grant or a prize, as I have one of those. Wanted to help you understand what you have to do to pursue a grant, just to capture a grant, what you should prepare for, what the process is like, and then some of the preparation and the submission process. As I said, I have a startup here, and I've applied for a few grants, but I've gotten one from the Department of Energy called the Integration, it's I2X group, and that is for expanding my IQMS, my interconnection queue management system, into electric vehicles. And then I also have won the I'm also technically a semi-finalist in the American-Made Solar Prize, which is a prize from the Department of Energy, the CETO office in the Department of Energy. And both of these had a lot of similarities. There's a very set process that you need to go through if you want to do a grant. So I wanted to talk to you guys about that today. The most important thing about getting a grant is knowing what you have to offer them. Figure out what agency your solution fits into best, where you can fit in. My personal one is obviously the Department of Energy, because I'm in the renewable space. They support renewable energy quite a bit, obviously. Even with the change in administration, there's still some very significant support in renewable energy and electric vehicles. I have a client, and I have submitted grants or grant requests for them for the NIH and for the USDA and for the Department of Defense. It all just kind of figure out where you fit in best. And this is harder than it sounds, because there's a lot of stuff going on in our government. Even today, there are several. The prize that I have is 3 layers down in the Department of Energy, and the grant is 4. Like it's Department of Energy, EERE, I2X, and then my grant. So there's a lot of. It can be very difficult to wade through all the options. It's one of those situations where you can get a lot of returns. If you Google it, you get a lot of returns, but then you have a lot of returns, and so you have to figure out what's the most valuable. It's really important also when you were deciding where you fit in with these grants and what's important, really try to look at their objectives and map them to what you have to offer. How do you fit in there? The Department of Energy just recently released new goals for the department, and one of them is streamlining permitting, and that's where I sit. There's also another one for spurring innovation, and again, hello, that's right where I am. So I can leverage that information to help me figure out where I can find a grant that will suit me. And lastly, like everything you want to do, you want to make sure that it suits their appeal. What's so special about your product that's so different or so new that the government just can't live without it? It's really also important to develop relationships. Now, I know it sounds like in the government you shouldn't have to do that, but in fact you do. And I think that's has a lot to do with why I got the I2X grant. It's because I worked with them. I worked with that office. I asked them what their question was. They had several different inputs to reach their goals, and I contributed there as where I could. So it's really critical to develop those relationships. And in fact, a lot of grant awarding agencies want you to do that. NIH, Department of Energy, and even some of the DoD ones will in your little section of the grant, they'll say so and so is the product manager, and here's their address, here's their email address. And I didn't think I was ever going to get a response, but I'll be danged. I sent off a response to the NIH people, and a day and a half later, I sent off an email to the NIH gal, and a day and a half later, she sent something back. We had a couple meetings, and she really helped us be strategic in our presentation. So that's really go and make friends. That's really just a good approach to helping to get a grant. And there are a lot of agency online resources too. They'll explain a lot about grants. And some of them even have what they call a phase 0, which is almost like a startup for grants. You can meet different product managers. They'll tell you about their process. They'll tell you about their evaluation process and what will happen when you win. So that's that's really important. So make sure you take advantage of that if you're really serious about grants. Another important thing is to really understand what you're getting into when you decide you're going to go for grant capture. It's an investment, and is it worth your time? A lot of us as startup owners don't have a ton of time. Do you have the time to find your grant and meet and do business development with the government people, and then write it and prepare it and submit it? It's a big decision, because only about 10% of the grants that are submitted ever get accepted by the government. And that means, so I believe SBIR, some of the SBIR, which is a small business innovation and research grants, they will get hundreds of grants. So of the, we'll say, you know, so if they get 500 grants, only 50 will be funded. So you have to know what you're getting into. And there's also often, particularly with traditional grants, quite an administrative burden. Is that something you want to engage in? There's a ton of reporting that you have to do. You have to report on just about everything. And the reporting burden may also change in the future. I'm not sure what that might look like, but I don't think it's going to go away. It's really important that you understand the funding instrument. For example, I have a grant from I2X. I have a prize from the American Made Solar Prize. Just understand what the difference are between that. So the grant's a real grant, and it comes with administrative burden. And interestingly, my accountant tells me that it's not considered income, which is interesting. But the prize that I have through the American Made Solar Prize is considered income. So that's an interesting thing to me, and kind of personifies the problems sometimes with government. But that doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Well, the main reason why is a grant is considered for covering business expenses, and so you have to administratively justify all the expenses.
Oh, okay.
And therefore, that's why it doesn't qualify as income, because you're paying expenses and not paying income.
Oh,
But
okay.
the prize is considered an award, that's why you don't have to do all the administrative work.
Yeah,
Am I
yeah.
correct in that assessment?
I'm not sure the accounting part of that, but
You know, it depends. So each grant has its own set of criteria in terms of what's required for reporting. But ideally, the grants are intended for operating expenses, yes. Does that include salaries? It could include salaries. Does that include the business owner's salaries? It could include that. So really depending on how you structure and what the specific criteria is for the grant.
okay. So there's a lot of different funding instruments in the government, different grants and prizes that they provide. There's a grant versus prizes. Look at those. The prizes are interesting because they just give you the money. I could take my American Made Solar Prize and go buy a car if I wanted to. Now, until my car dies and can't be put back together again, I won't be doing that. But you can. The grant, again, has some administrative constraints. There's the SBIR/STTR program, which is really, really great for startups because they're really looking for pre-funding or initial phases of any kind of organization. If you have an idea or a innovation, they can really help you. Yeah.
Concept. So in other words, here's the problem. Here's how I would solve it. But I'm sorry. I'm going to pull a little bit. So, how many of you have seen the movie Ready Player One?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's a great movie. I really like that.
Okay. I have the patent behind Ready Player One. I can literally pull 1,000 people on a video game faster than you can play a 10-person LAN. How? Distribution. Problem. I have to get new networking hardware developed because the old networking hardware is focused on security, whereas I need to focus on distribution. Specifically, with the latest standard for networking, they eliminated broadcast signals. Well, when you're distributing this information for a whole bunch of players, you don't need to send out 1,000+ messages, one message per player to every other player. You can send one message for an entity and do it. So you have to develop the new hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're getting into it is with the SBIR, you are looking at, okay, what's the new concept or structure that you have that delivers stuff so that even more so beyond you're solving that one problem. And I'm going to pick on you a little bit now. But when you learn something new, does it open up more doors that then other people can explore and other people can advance the science? And this is why you have patents. Because you open up an idea, you prove the idea works, then 10, 20 other people come up with new ideas related to your idea that expand the knowledge and give the things like America dominant, because this is why America's a dominant nation, because we've developed a lot of good ideas, haven't we?
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interjecting.
No, no worries. So the SBIR is exactly that. It wants to take a concept and commercialize it. The SBIR and the STTR, which is more focused on universities, really wants to go to commercialization. They want to help you take your idea and commercialize it. Usually has a couple of phases, so that's what that one's about. The broad agency announcement, or the omnibus, the NIH calls it an omnibus. Those are they're much broader than SBIRs. They're not limited to small businesses, so it's very, very competitive. There's also topic related or special interest listings. The NIH calls these NOSIs, Notice of Special Interest, and they cover everything under the sun. I'm not sure if that's going to be quite as broad. Many grants have multiple phases, so the SBIRs have a phase 1, which is really about the concept, and then phase 2 is really dedicated to commercialization. There's other ones that have phase 1 and phase 2. My grant from I2X has a phase 1 and a phase 2, and they're set up with different goals and different and follow-on money. So you really have to understand what you're getting into when you start that. And then also, it's really important to confirm the requirements. Things like, are you eligible? Most of them everybody in this room will be pretty widely eligible, because they're often for small businesses. All the prior set-asides, what we call set-asides, are pretty much gone now, so no more disabled veterans, probably no more women-owned small businesses, 8A disadvantaged businesses, Hub Zone, probably all gone, but in any case, they may come back, and if they do, those set-asides there will be some eligibility requirements for that. The structure of the business, your citizenship, all of those things can factor into eligibility. So just make sure you know if you're eligible before you go too far.
I'm going to jump in really quickly. Is anybody here not familiar with set-asides are when it comes to federal government? So when you go to register with sam.gov, if you're looking to bid on federal opportunities, right? They usually have one big bucket of money that they're looking to award for that specific project or opportunity. Now what ends up happening is they say, we actually want to set aside a certain amount, a certain percentage, or the entire project specifically for somebody disabled, a woman-owned certified company, all of these different areas. But with the changes in the administration and DEI, we think some of that is going to go away. So even the SBA, like 8A certifications for disadvantaged groups, some of that is going to go away. So it's going to make it a little bit harder for the smaller businesses to be able to capture those good opportunities.
Yeah, that's true. If you're smart, you won't have a problem. But if you're not, or even if you're overlooked, you might have a problem. So one thing that's important when you're trying to figure out what grants to go after is make sure you know the release dates. Most importantly, the notice of intent. A lot of government agencies will put out a notice of intent that says, hey, we're going to do this in the next couple of months. So know the date of the full selection when you really have what the deadline is. And I sign up for notifications because I forget these sorts of things. So there's plenty, again, the agencies have plenty of information out there for you if you want to do that. There's most of the information that you can find is on grants.gov. And again, once you identify the grant you want to go for, you can sign up on grants.gov to get the notifications and to get more information and to participate there. One thing I will say is that it used to be really predictable. The timing used to be very predictable on this. And there was a spring and fall, and they did the same time every year, but that's probably going to change a little. But if you wanted to look at previous submissions, sometimes you can find those on grants.gov. So when you go to prepare your grant, you want to start with the information, the solicitation, that's what it's called, what the agency puts out for you to read. Make sure you understand this. I can't stress this enough. Read the solicitation. Understand what the deliverables are. A lot of them now are starting out with what they call a letter of intent, which is kind of a 3 or 5 page white paper. It's very short, it's very descriptive. Then there'll be a full submission, and sometimes, like I said before, there'll be different phases. Phase 1, phase 2, different follow-ons. So understand what they want from you, what you have to submit. And make sure you comply with formatting requirements, page limits, and all this kind of stuff. So I learned this the hard way because I submitted a grant to the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and I thought it was great. And they rejected it immediately because I had used the wrong spacing, the wrong line spacing. I missed that in the solicitation, and it was supposed to be 1.5, and I did mine in 1. So not only did I screw that up for myself, my client as well, who applied in another section. It's also really good to know the structure of the solicitation. So when you're putting it together, you're putting your response together, you can go and find where those directions are, because it's never in one place. NIH will put out a solicitation and they refer to 2 or 3 different websites, web pages for more specific information. The good news is once you find it, NIH has some great guidance. And as I said before, non-compliance means disqualification. They have so many to go through that they will immediately disqualify you if you don't meet the basic requirements, line structure, page limit, any of that, yeah?
Now you say disqualify. So do you just mean that they'll take your thing and they'll reject it?
Yep.
Or that it has a long-term rejection?
No, it's just for that one. It's just for that one. So, but you will, your submission will be immediately disqualified, which I put a lot of effort into mine, and I was mad about it. But it was my mistake, so I was, yeah.
But you could have, the next time, gone in and made changes and resubmitted for next bidding cycle.
I could have, but the bidding cycle is closed now for who knows how long. But yeah, so that was a lesson learned on my part. What'd you have to say?
Just you mentioned about the STTR and SBIR.
Uh-huh.
Did you deal with them as well? Did you apply for grants with SBIR?
Absolutely, I would. Yeah.
Did you have experience in dealing with them as well?
I did. Yes. Yes. I've done SBIRs for Department of Defense, Energy, obviously, and Homeland, although that was kind of an odd experience, as well as Homeland, Agriculture.
But that's all part of the SBIR?
Yes, SBIR is an overarching programs, and I believe there's 11 agencies that participate. Although that, again, the caveat, given the current administration, that may change. Just remember that when you're preparing this, you have to be really specific about the formatting. And then once you understand what you have to provide to them, develop your capture plan. And this is how when you develop a plan for the writing and your messaging to them. There are a couple different ways things I like to use. One's called the Shipley method, one's the Heilmeier catechism. Shipley is just a way to organize your thoughts. Heilmeier is the same thing. It's just a way to organize your thoughts so you can respond in a way that's helpful. One of the hallmarks of almost all of these grants is that they want you to explain what your innovation is and why it's different. So you also have to be able to give them a really solid example of why you're different from your market. So you have to understand your market pretty well. They're also looking for customer discovery, but they really want to understand what's different about you, what's so special about you. Yeah.
Sorry, I hate to interject. So I'm going to go back to mine. So the reason why I'm saying is you can get faster cycle times.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you reduce the amount of congestion across the network, you can get faster cycles and deliver messages faster.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're talking about when you talk about data capture is you're talking, okay, here's how long it takes a conventional approach. Here's how long in this test case with this data set it took. And you're showing the difference between one versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
And you're literally showing that your system's faster.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what you're doing. You've got to figure out, okay, I'm saying this idea is true, this will solve this problem. how do I prove it solves the problem? And you're looking at what data you have to collect and document. Because it is a government, and the government loves documentation more than anything else. doesn't
Absolutely,
it?
yes.
And so you're saying, okay, I've got to plan ahead to know what data I need to properly document my solution in the end. And
Yeah.
that needs to be identified beforehand. And you really need to probably tell them when you're writing your submission, this is how I'm going to document it.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yes, that's great. Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm interjecting.
That's okay. So yeah, collect data and citations. Make sure, and even as you're planning how you're going about this, figure out how you want to use the data you have, or if you have to go and get additional data. Tell your story with hard data. They want to understand. They want the rubber meets the road, and the more you do that, the more competitive your participation, your grant will be, your request will be, and limit the traditional marketing language. You know, they see a lot of these every day, so try to tone down the marketing language as much as possible. They just want to understand the data and your plan. So when you're figuring out your capture plan, you want to make sure that you identify your team, the team for who's going to be on your grant, who's going to do the work of your grant, and also the team that's going to put together the grant. It might be the same people, they might not be the same people. You might need more of a finance person to help you represent your budget, or you might need a copy editor for the actual preparing of the grant. Make sure you assign writing and reviewing tasks early, and always, always, always write to the evaluation criteria. That should be the most important part of what you do. Make sure you weave in there the information, the goals of the agency or the office, the specific office that you're applying to. That's important. And then, of course, establish a budget. One of the things that's often a challenge with grants is if you're partnering with a university, which is always a good idea to be doing, because there's often an emphasis on a PhD for a lot of these grants. If you have a PhD, particularly if you're doing an early stage grant, you want to have some research. A PhD is great, but a university will often take upwards of 50% in their administrative overhead. So if you have a budget of $100,000 for a phase 1 SBIR, you got to figure out how to pay the university 50% and still meet the criteria, the evaluation criteria for what the SBIRs require of the small business, which is typically around a third has to be spent by the small business, and 2/3 has to be spent by the small business, and 1/3 has to be spent by any partners you have, which would be the university. So that's always trying to figure out that budgeting is always an interesting time. And so once you figured out the writing and you've got your team together and you figured out the budget, then you have to submit the dang thing, and you've gotten it all written and it's finalized. And this is not easy. Don't expect this to be a simple click like in the regular world. If for government, there's a whole process just for this, and that's why it's so important. And it takes a while as well. And I can only imagine that in the next few years with the current administration, this might even take longer. So account creation, just to get an account, is sam.gov and a login.gov accounts are required. And you must also have an EIN, a cage code. It's either a cage code or a DUNS number is what it's called. And those are specific numbers that are assigned to your organization. EIN comes from the IRS, and the DUNS code, I believe, comes from SAM, but I don't remember offhand.
Dun and Bradstreet.
Dun and
Bradstreet.
Yeah, the cage code though comes from SAM.
The cage code is the way the government pays you, basically. You receive
Yeah,
your own
yeah.
specific cage code.
So to apply grants.gov, to actually submit, to click that button that says submit, you actually have to have all of those things in place before you submit. One thing that's important is to kind of determine what roles your organization is going to have in grants.gov. They have several different roles, and everybody, of course, because that's how the government works, they all have different rights. The e-business point of contact is the person who has sort of the universal rights for the account, and they can assign rights to other people. The workspace manager and can add things to your workspace, and the workspace is where you go for, you actually put things together in that. And then there's the AOR, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't remember what that acronym is, but those are roles who people who can submit or contribute or alter the submission that's in progress. So this is, you submit via grants.gov, and one thing to note is that you can search for any grant on grants.gov. That doesn't even require a login, they're all there. But once you want to start doing your work, then you need to have everything in place to get into grants.gov to create the workspace. And this is where you will see the login. And the reason I put this here is because this little caveat here that says you will be prompted to link your grants.gov to account to a login.gov account. Just so you know that those things all have to be in place before you can actually log in and start working. And then, as I talked about a little bit, you have to have a workspace. And this is a kind of an abandoned one I did earlier this year. And this is for the phase 1 submission at NIH. And you can see all the different forms that you have to fill out here. So while the phase 1 says it's I think they use accelerated, or it's a lower administrative burden. This is what the government thinks is a lower administrative burden. So that can be a challenge. As you go forward, the first thing you want to do when you're doing this is submit the SF424. It kind of populates the other forms with all your information. And there are only 22 areas for your consideration. Some of them will not be relevant to you, and some of them will. And the different agencies within the government use them a little bit differently. So again, go back to the solicitation. It will probably have a link to the SF424 and how they want that figured out. NIH, for example, is different from DOE. So just make sure that you understand what the requirements are there. Start early when you're actually going to submit something. Plan at least a couple of days to get that right. Start the forms that you can early. If, for example, you're at NIH and you have mammalian or human subjects, there's a special form for that. So, but you can get that out of the way early because a lot of it's kind of a yes, no, do you have this, do you have that kind of thing. You may also have a data sharing plan that you have to put together. I did one for I2X, used it again for solar, not for the solar prize, for another grant, for the USDA grant, I think. Just make sure your plan, this is my project manager side of me, make sure that everybody understands what the project is, what their responsibilities are, and that they're available. And remember that some minor adjustments can be made after award, in those post-award negotiations. You can even go so far as to change the non-primary people. You're going to identify a principal investigator. That person really can't change. But if you have a graduate student or a database manager or something like that underneath who is not a named person, then you can usually change them if that happens. But be advised that late changes to any of these forms are really risky. If you want to change, for example, if you want to change the people, like I just mentioned, you then have to change them on the SF242. You have to change them on a personnel form. You may have to re-upload their CVs or resumes, and you have to change their information on the budget and on the budget justification page. So, and all of those forms have to be managed through that government interface, so it's not always great. The good news is it has been very stable of late. Early on, it was kind of not so great in terms of just availability and stability and access. And the customer support line is awesome. I've had great success with the government, grants.gov, customer support, the live people, the customer support line. Their online help is terrible, don't bother. So I've kind of gone through this at a pretty high level. Does anybody have questions?
Yeah, I do. You know, I would really love for you to share whatever you can share in terms of your journey. Like you came with like a concept, I was thinking about this, I recognize this gap. What do I need to do to formulate it and to make it into a business? Like that entrepreneurial journey. Is that something you can share with us?
Sure. So my entrepreneurial journey started at NV Energy, where I used to work. I worked there as an IT project manager for 6.5, 7 years. Really enjoyed it. But in the process of that, I saw that there was the interconnection process was really a mess. Now, interconnection is when you go and say you want solar on your house, there is a process that you have to go through to get that get permission to operate, PTO, to plug in and start generating your own power through the solar panels. And I saw that this process, the queue to manage that was a mess, just a terrible mess. It was bad at NV Energy, and so one of the things I did was managed a project to digitize that for NVE. And during the course of that project, I saw how awful it was, and that it was even more acute for small and medium-sized utilities. So I developed a product that streamlines that and does some automations for that project. Now, I don't know if anybody in here has put solar on their house here in Nevada. Oh, okay. Well, it happened. You know, it's not uncommon. So I can usually stop my conversation right there because they all agree with me that it's terrible, and then we're done. So that's where I got my idea, and I started working kind of in my spare time. And when I wasn't at NVE, I was never at NVE when I did this. They cannot claim copyright to my business. Very careful not to ever be at NV Energy when I was working on this. But then I left NV Energy and got my software developed, and now I have non-diluted funding, which is like catnip to investors, and so now I'm moving forward with additional customer discovery and business development, which is the next stage of any organization. I'm really excited about that. I have a potential pilot customer through one of my grants, so that's very exciting. And I have been in contact with Rachel and used the SBDC. A lot of they had a lot of very good educational, helpful materials that I kind of looked at. And then also, I'll probably be coming back your way about loans here pretty soon. Yeah. So yeah, if anybody has any questions about that, I'm happy to take those questions as well.
Now, when you were getting your software developed, I'm not sure, because my big hurdle I have right now is reaching out to UNLV to try and get specific transceivers and transceivers integrated in the development of the hardware aspects of my system. And it's like I don't hear back at all.
You know, it's really difficult because I'm sorry.
Well, and you mentioned some of this stuff to make sure you have it online. We're looking at your development chapter plan, page 2, slide specifically. Because you were addressing that. Do you have any experience or anything with that? Because it's like, I'm a software person, data person. I am not an electrical engineering person. But yet when we start talking about transceivers and receivers, we're talking about the electrical components and designing electrical components.
So I think part of this is, right, it's part of the journey when it comes to the tech environment. So we have the idea, we develop what we know, what our strengths are, what we know to be true, all these things. We identify the gaps, and then we try to fill in those gaps with different resources, different, whether it's a board of advisors or with SBDC. So for you, what I try to tell my clients is let's develop it out as much as possible, create the business plan and the framework, identify those gaps very clearly, and find out who you need to partner with to fill those gaps. And that's when it's easy for me to present to UNLV a project, right?
Mhm.
This is, we need your, you know, your students, your faculty, your grad students to come in and help and work on these particular projects. And then it helps whether it's, you know, actually developing something or data validation, some sort of testing. So UNLV is a great partner for that, but it's just you have to kind of get to that phase so we know what we're presenting to them. You can't tell
Yeah.
them all of it and they go, okay, where do you need us?
Yeah.
You know, so I think part of that is we can have some conversations and see if that's something
Okay.
I can help you with.
But yeah, that right now, that's where I'm stalled.
Sure.
One of the things I was challenged with is that I'm pretty excited about interconnection because I'm a nerd, and also I'm a nerd, so I got too far into the weeds. Like I really found it helpful to go up one layer and talk about benefits, not features. So that was something that I really had to get better at, and honestly, I had to get better at public speaking and reading the room and understanding what was going on around me because I am 100% introverted nerd. And so that's been a big journey for me, and that kind of surprised me. It's a little more introspective than I'm entirely comfortable with. But so that's something that, you know, if you have that problem as well, you might want to think about taking a slightly higher level approach, maybe?
Well, I agree with what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I've done is I say a lot of it is, okay, how do you talk about this computer concept and what it's doing without the presence of computers? And
Yeah.
my favorite one is, okay, what am I doing? I'm bringing freeway where there's a road construction zone.
Okay, that's a good image.
Because when you're talking about network communication travels, you're talking about, okay, you can go through and it waits until it gets a signal back from the other side that it's received that. And so if you're doing it, especially if you're doing it like when you've got 12 servers sent to 1,000 different computers, that's 12,000 stops. Whereas if you do broadcast technology, you send it out to all 1,000 at one time, it's like a freeway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, okay, we'll need 12 freeways. And you can have 1,000 cars on that freeway, and you don't have to worry about it. And so you have to figure out how to translate this into a common speak that people can grasp and get a hold of. And that takes some work. It's something I'm constantly having to practice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, practice is the answer.
Yeah, and when I work with clients also, especially when we do tend to get deep into the weeds, right? Especially if it's our baby, it's our technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, we want to remember to show, don't tell. And it's taking it back to that marketing spin,
Yeah.
right? Especially in conversations, in presentations, if you are trying to get some sort of, you know, partnership, collaboration happening, show, don't tell. So let's work on pitch decks. Right? You can do that versus a whole lot of white paper to explain what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you can present that as like the backup documentation, but you can immediately, it's just an easier way to capture your audience's attention by having it display visually. They go, oh, that's what he's talking about. Right? So we can talk about that.
Yeah, because I don't want to get into the 67 pages of
Exactly.
detail.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know how to, like, where do I start? Where,
Yeah,
where do I condense? I have to
Yeah.
say with my technology company, when I did my pitch deck, I think I was at 36 slides.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like, but everything is important. I'm down to like 9.
Yeah, it's
Right?
yeah.
So you condense how you want to communicate it because you just start, when you practice, it's like, okay, now I know what they're listening for, and that's going to pique their interest to later ask questions.
And to respond back, it's important you know your audience and you communicate to your audience how your audience wants to hear. And you're talking about a lot of this stuff on some of your slides. You adjust your presentation to how they're used to communicating and hearing.
Yep.
So you have to understand your audience. If you don't understand your audience,
you're not going to be successful.
You're a lone merchant ship
Yeah.
in World War II with the Germans there.
Yeah.
The German
Yeah.
submarines there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a question?
So did you design or did you reformulate your idea or your product based off of the grants that you were seeing in your filtering, or did you just say, look, this is what I have, this is the team that I have, and then we will find a grant that fits? Because one is almost self-serving in terms of, or you're changing your product just so that way you can find a grant, as opposed to like, look, this is what I developed, I think is the best idea, that's out there, people would like it, I need to find a grant that fits, as opposed to the other way, which is get a grant, find a grant, and then design a product that.
It's actually harder to find grants that way. Like, they want to know, like, you've done your market research,
Yeah.
you've done your competitive analysis, you know exactly where your product or idea fits, right? I always say stick to the core, stick to your core functionality. And oftentimes as entrepreneurs, as creatives, as developers, it's like, oh, I've got this other idea, if I bring it in here, and all of a sudden it's like, where do I pick up again? So a lot of that is, we can sit down and talk and just create that framework, make sure we've identified the core functionality and really what the core need and solution is that you're providing, right?
Yeah.
And really hone in on that, create the right language around it, and start from there. You never want to move away from what that core is. I can't tell you
Yeah.
how many times clients will come in and they'll present a core to me. I had one recently that did a pitch event, and we were working on a completely different concept. He said he wanted to pitch specifically for this event, kind of the same thing as trying to go after a one grant. And he said, here are 5 different options. Which one should I pitch? And I'm like, this is so far away from what we've been working on. He's like, but I want to win this pitch competition. And so I was like, okay, but we really need to go back and work on your core. So he ended up presenting me with 4 different ones. I gave him feedback. There's a lot of time, a lot of energy going back and forth. And what he ended up presenting was a 5th option that I never even saw, and he didn't end up winning. So part of that was, how did that really serve you?
Yeah, you don't want to. Well, for one thing, if you find a grant and you adjust to your product to go for a grant, well, then what happens when you win it? Well, then you got to go do that, not what you originally wanted to do. So it's always better to stay focused where you're an expert, what you know, what you're excited about, what you have data for. That's where you should find your grant. And probably there's something out there, and if there's not, well, that's an answer too. It's not the greatest one, but it's an answer.
I think that's okay.
Yeah, that's an answer.
Yes.
And what you should do though is try to you take your core, you keep the core solid. But like I said, mine is about improving the speed of interactive connections. So like, I'm going to pick on the military, how could that benefit? Well, in the Iraq War, what was the latest leading cause of death? It was friendly fire. Why? Because war is confusing, war is complex, people are used to dealing with so many different variables. But if you've got a lot of people that are interacting and communicating, can people start developing new skills by having simulations that cover that level of complexity? Yes. So that can save them lives. So you take the core thing. I've not changed any of my concept, have I? But I've said, but we can use this concept to apply to this need you have and do it. But what they're saying is, and I agree, is you need to make sure you stay with core focus and then you apply it to their problems.
And part of the presentation also is you want to include use of funds, right? So that's where you get a little creative, right? In terms of identifying how you're going to use it, what part of the project, what phase, those sort of things.
Yeah. That's why it's really important to understand what you have to offer and then how it fits into what they need. And that's why it's so important to go and develop those relationships, because they'll really be able to help you. Yeah. It's an investment. It's not as easy as just writing some stuff and sending it in. It's just not. So.
Well, thank you so much, Leona. That was really wonderful. Like, that was a lot of information. we'll have
Thanks.
questions on grants and we'll.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.